I'd been practicing my Nobel acceptance speech for 20 years. Not out loud, I wasn't completely delusional. But in those quiet moments between sleep and waking, I'd refined every word. The part about Dr. Sinclair would be gracious, of course. A single line acknowledging my former mentor, delivered with just enough pause to let everyone remember how she'd torn apart my life's work in Geneva 8 years ago. Now, riding the elevator 15 kilometers straight down into the Earth's crust, I finally understood what rock bottom actually looked like. A consultant gig that real scientists had already turned down, analyzing geological noise that probably meant nothing for a mining consortium that definitely didn't care about xenolinguistics. "You're gripping that handrail like it insulted your mother," Frank Hackett said from across the elevator cage. He stood with his feet spread wide, not even holding on, riding the vibrations like a sailor on deck. The man had introduced himself as lead safety engineer, but everything about him, from his frayed notebook to his 1,000-yard stare, screamed survivor of things that shouldn't be survived. "First time this deep," I managed. "Everyone says that." He pulled out a battered thermos and took a swig of what smelled like engine oil masquerading as coffee. Then after a few weeks, they stopped mentioning depth at all. Start talking about other things, the sounds that shouldn't exist, the equipment that fails in ways the manufacturer swears are impossible. "You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to prepare you. There's a difference." Frank studied me with eyes that had seen too many consultant types come and go. 6 months ago, we had a geological surveyor at the breach point. Good man, careful. His drill rig didn't just malfunction. The metal turned into something else. Something mineral. Beautiful, actually, if you ignored the fact that he was still partially fused to it when we found him. The elevator shook, and my stomach tried to crawl up through my throat. "The official report blamed thermal dynamics," Frank continued. "But thermal dynamics doesn't selectively transmute industrial steel while leaving human tissue partially intact. The man's wedding ring was untouched. Explain that with your fancy degrees." I could have told him that I had a doctorate from Oxford, that I'd written the book, literally, on theoretical syntax in non-human intelligence. But Frank Hackett didn't strike me as someone who'd be impressed. He struck me as someone who'd already figured out exactly why a xenolinguist had been brought to a mine, and he didn't like the implications. "Director Reed says you're here about the signal," he said, confirming my suspicion. "The electromagnetic anomaly, yes." "Anomaly, that's what we're calling it. Not the thing that's been driving our equipment crazy for 3 months. An anomaly." He shook his head. "Let me tell you something about anomalies, Dr. Creed. In my experience, when something 15 kilometers underground starts broadcasting structured patterns that make our senses scream, that's not an anomaly. That's an invitation." "An invitation to what?" The elevator began to slow. Frank moved to the gate, his hand resting on the release mechanism. "That's what you're here to tell us, isn't it?" The last 3 consultants said it was geological resonance. Pressure waves creating false patterns. But they didn't speak 17 languages. They hadn't written papers on. He pulled out a worn piece of paper from his pocket and read, "The linguistic probability of non-terrestrial communication through mathematical constants." He'd done his homework. I felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Someone had actually read my work, but only because they were desperate enough to scrape the bottom of the academic barrel. "The Creed constant," he continued, folding the paper away. "The idea that truly advanced intelligence would communicate through pure mathematics. Elegant theory. Shame about what Sinclair did to it in Geneva. Even here, 15 kilometers below the surface, I couldn't escape it. That was a difference of interpretation. That was a public execution from what I heard." Frank's voice held no malice, just the flat delivery of fact. "She didn't just disagree with you. She proved you wrong in front of everyone who mattered. And now you're here, which means either you're right and she's wrong, or..." He trailed off, pulling open the elevator gate. "Or what?" "Or Director Reed is desperate enough to gamble on a discredited theory Because the alternative is admitting we've spent 5 years and $60 billion digging towards something we don't understand. The gate clanged open, revealing a steel corridor that stretched into harsh fluorescent infinity. Beneath the noise of machinery and the distant clang of mining work, I heard something. Or rather, I felt it. A rhythm that vibrated through the rock itself, structured and intentional, like a heartbeat speaking in prime numbers. Frank must have seen something change in my expression because his hand moved to his radio. "Don't," I said, stepping out of the elevator. "Not yet." "You hear it," he said. I nodded, already reaching for my tablet to capture the pattern before it faded. But it didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger, layering frequencies in ways that shouldn't be possible through solid rock. "The last consultants couldn't hear it," Frank said quietly. "They needed equipment to detect it. But you..." He watched me work. "Director Reed is going to love you." "This isn't geological," I muttered, lost in the data streaming across my screen. "The mathematical progression, it's following modified Fibonacci sequences, but with intentional variations. It's beautiful. Beautiful." Frank's voice had gone flat. "That's what Hendricks said, right before his drill turned to mineral. Said the pattern was beautiful." I looked up from my tablet to find him staring at me with an expression I'd seen before. In my ex-wife's eyes, in Sinclair's, in everyone who'd watched me disappear into my work and leave the real world behind. "Dr. Creed," he said carefully, "I need you to understand something. Down here, beautiful usually means dangerous, and dangerous means people die. So before you go chasing your Nobel Prize, remember that there are 75 souls in this mine who just want to make it home to their families." Frank's radio crackled to life. "Hackett, we've got a situation at the breach point. The miners..." "Sir, you need to see this." He was already moving, and I found myself following, my tablet still recording the signal. The journey to the breach point took 12 minutes. Frank led me through a maze of industrial corridors, past crew quarters that looked like shipping containers, and through airlocks that hissed like angry snakes. The signal in my head grew stronger with every step. "Jesus Christ," Frank whispered. Below us, where there should have been solid rock, was a hole in reality. I'd expected a cave, maybe an underground chamber. What I saw defied every law of physics I'd pretended to understand. The breach was perfectly circular, about 20 meters across, and through it was sky. Violet sky, like twilight had been turned inside out, with structures hanging upward, or downward, depending on your perspective, into an endless amethyst void. "When did this happen?" My voice came out strangled. 40 minutes ago. The drill team was widening the original bore when the rock gave way, like it wanted to open. Frank was already on his radio, barking orders about containment protocols and evacuation routes. Nothing fell through. That's the part that breaks my brain. Horvat dropped his wrench right at the edge, and it just sat there, like there's still floor, even though we can see there isn't. 3 miners stood at the barrier's edge, their safety harnesses the only thing keeping them from doing something stupid. One of them, a woman with grime-streaked face, was weeping. "They won't leave," Frank muttered. "Been ordering them back for 20 minutes, but they say they need to stay. Say they're waiting." Waiting for what? That's when the invitation became explicit. It didn't come through my ears or my equipment. It arrived fully formed in my consciousness, like remembering something I'd always known. Images cascaded through my mind, cities of living light, beings of pure thought dancing through cosmic gardens, mathematics given form and purpose. And underneath it all, a profound sadness, an ache of imprisonment that made my chest tight. "Help us." The words weren't English, weren't any language I knew, but I understood them perfectly. They came wrapped in concepts of desperate hope, of eons of patient suffering, of Dr. Creed. Frank's hand was on my shoulder, shaking me. "You stopped breathing for 30 seconds. What the hell just happened?" They're prisoners," I gasped, my tablet clattering to the floor. Something's been keeping them trapped, and we made a door. Evelyn Reed's voice cut through the comms system like a surgical blade. Dr. Creed, Mr. Hackett, report to conference room A immediately. Frank helped me to my feet, his expression cycling between concern and suspicion. Can you walk? I nodded, though my legs felt like water. The images were still flowing, slower now, more controlled. They were being careful not to overwhelm me, considerate. That's what struck me most. Whatever was communicating felt genuinely considerate of my limitations. Conference room A turned out to be a repurposed storage container with delusions of grandeur. Evelyn Reed stood at its center, her charcoal suit crisp despite the industrial setting. She looked like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. Dr. Creed, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. Tell me you have something. I opened my mouth to speak, then closed it. How did you explain that humanity had just made first contact with something that communicated through direct neural interface? How did you tell someone that everything we thought we knew about life in the universe had just become obsolete? Show her the data, Frank said quietly. Start with what you can prove. I retrieved my tablet, pulling up the pattern analysis. The signal follows a mathematical structure it's not natural. It uses prime number sequences as a baseline, but builds complexity through dimensional folding English, Dr. Creed. It's a language. A completely artificial designed language using mathematics as vocabulary and physics as grammar. And it's been specifically tuned to human neural frequencies. They've been listening to us, learning how we think, and they've built a communication protocol that bypasses our ears entirely. Reed's eyes glittered. They? I hesitated. Once I said it out loud, there would be no taking it back. My career, such as it was, would either end in this room or transform into something unrecognizable. I've made contact with an intelligence on the other side of the breach. They claim to be refugees. Prisoners of some kind of cosmic conflict, trapped in inverted space the timescales don't translate properly, but we're talking geological epochs. They've been waiting for someone to develop the technology to hear them. And you believe them? Frank watched me carefully, his thumb running over something in his pocket, a nervous habit I'd noticed in the elevator. I believe they're real, I said carefully. I believe they're intelligent. As for their story, I pulled up the neural recording I'd managed to capture. Judge for yourself. I played it through the tablet's speakers, not the full experience, just the carrier wave. Even filtered and compressed, it was beautiful. The mathematics sang, creating harmonies, building structures of pure logic that somehow conveyed emotion. Reed listened for exactly 10 seconds before cutting it off. How long before you can establish full communication? Director, Frank interrupted. We need to discuss safety protocols. We have no idea what I have, Mr. Hackett, is a fully operational mining facility that just became the most important scientific installation in human history. Her voice could have frosted glass. Dr. Creed, I'm giving you unlimited resources. Whatever you need, equipment, personnel, coffee that doesn't taste like motor oil, it's yours. How long? The beings on the other side must have been listening, because the answer arrived in my mind with perfect clarity. They're ready now, I heard myself say. They've been ready for longer than our species has existed. They just needed someone who could hear them properly. Then set it up. Full documentation, full recording. I want every major university and government agency watching when we make formal contact. She turned to Frank. And you will ensure the safety of this operation by following Dr. Creed's requirements exactly. No more paranoid speculation about mineralized drill equipment. Frank's jaw tightened. 3 of my people are standing at that breach like they're hypnotized. That's not paranoid speculation. That's a sign we're on the right track. I interrupted, surprising myself with my own certainty. They're not hypnotized. They're receiving, like human antennas. The beings are using them to strengthen the signal, to make sure we understand they mean no harm. It was a guess, but it felt right. Everything about this felt right in a way my work hadn't in years. Not since before Geneva, before Sinclair's systematic demolition of everything I'd believed. 48 hours, Reed said. I'll have the world's attention in 48 hours. Be ready to translate for our new friends, Dr. Creed. And try to look presentable. This will be bigger than the moon landing. She left without another word, her heels clicking against the metal floor with metronomic precision. Frank waited until she was gone before speaking. Those 3 miners at the breach. One of them is my niece, Sarah. Good kid, careful worker, never had a single safety violation. Now she's standing at the edge, crying about beauty she can't describe. He fixed me with a stare that could have drilled through bedrock. So I'm going to ask you straight. Is this going to hurt them? The answer came from the beings themselves, flowing through my consciousness like warm honey. We would never harm those who free us. They are witnesses to the first moment of a new age. They will be remembered as heroes. No, I told Frank, and I felt the absolute certainty that had once defined my work. This won't hurt anyone. This is going to save everyone. Frank studied my face. You know what? I almost believe you. And that terrifies me more than anything else in this God-forsaken hole. He headed for the door, pausing at the threshold. Get some rest, Dr. Creed. You look like a man who just found religion. After he left, I sat alone in the conference room. The beings sent waves of gratitude that made my eyes water. They'd been trying to communicate for so long, screaming into the darkness of solid rock. And finally, someone had heard them. They showed me fragments of their world. Cities that existed in 11 dimensions, music that could reshape matter. And through it all, that persistent undercurrent of sadness, of imprisonment, of injustice that spanned eons. Soon, they promised. Soon we will share everything. Soon we will be free. I was already planning my Nobel speech, the real one this time. The one where I wouldn't mention Sinclair at all, because she would have become irrelevant. A footnote in the story of humanity's greatest discovery. My discovery. The signal drummed approval through my neurons, and I smiled. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a tiny voice that sounded like my ex-wife whispered that I was doing it again, choosing the work over everything else, choosing vindication over wisdom. I ignored it, just like I always had. After all, I was about to change the world. The world was watching me explain the impossible, and I'd never been happier. What you're seeing here, I said, gesturing to the holographic display floating above Conference Room A's newly installed projection system, is their mathematical signature for sorrow. Note how it incorporates both quantum probability waves and classical harmonics. They think in physics we haven't invented yet. 47 monitors lined the walls, each showing a different university, government facility, or research center. MIT, Oxford, the Pentagon, CERN, everyone who mattered was listening. Evelyn Reed stood in the corner like a satisfied cat, occasionally fielding calls from world leaders on her encrypted phone. It had been 6 days since the breach. 6 days of 18-hour sessions with the beings who called themselves the Ethel Guard, a name that translated roughly to those who guard the eternal. In that time, I'd become fluent in their language of living mathematics, and they'd shared their story. Dr. Creed, the representative from Beijing, cut in. You're asking us to believe these entities have been imprisoned in inverted space for millions of years. 63 million, to be precise, I corrected, pulling up the geological data they'd provided. They were exploring dimensional mechanics. Think of it as testing the boundaries between parallel realities, when another species, the Virathi, attacked without provocation. The Virathi feared the Ethelguard's advancing knowledge and used our planet, which was barely cooling at the time, as the basis for a prison. They folded space inside Earth's core, creating an inverted realm where the Ethelguard have been trapped ever since. Like a snow globe, someone from NASA offered. turned inside out. If snow globes could contain civilizations older than our solar system, yes. Dr. Harrison from Harvard raised his hand on screen 12. The energy requirements for such a prison would be astronomical, I finished, which is why the Ethelgard have been unable to escape despite their advancement. The prison feeds on Earth's rotational energy and magnetic field. It's brilliant, really. Monstrous, but brilliant. Frank Hackett entered the conference room, his presence immediately lowering the temperature. He'd been documenting what he called anomalies all week. Equipment failures, strange behaviors among the crew, unexplained energy spikes. I'd been documenting them too, but my interpretations differed from his. "Dr. Creed," Frank said, ignoring the screens full of dignitaries. "I need to show you something. We're in the middle of a briefing. Now!" The tone in his voice made me excuse myself. Evelyn's eyes promised consequences, but I followed Frank to the maintenance bay. What I saw there made my certainty waver for the first time in days. Sarah, Frank's niece, stood perfectly still beside a mining excavator. Her eyes were open but unfocused, and she was humming. The sound matched the Ethelgard's carrier frequency perfectly, something that should have been impossible for human vocal cords. "She's been like this for 3 hours," Frank said. "Won't respond, won't move. The medical team can't find anything wrong with her physically, but look at this." He showed me a tablet displaying her brain scans. The neural activity was unlike anything I'd seen, entire regions firing in synchronized patterns that matched the mathematical structures I'd been translating. "She's not the only one," Frank continued. 17 crew members have reported dreams where they're floating in violet space, being embraced by beings of light who promise to cure their cancer, fix their marriages, solve all their problems. Thompson swears he saw his dead son in the breach, telling him everything would be okay once the door opens properly. "They're trying to comfort us," I said. "The Ethelgard know we're afraid. They're showing us personalized visions of hope. Or they're manipulating us." Frank grabbed my arm. "You're so deep in this, you can't see what's happening. They're not talking to you, Tristan. They're programming you." I yanked free, anger flaring. "You don't understand the complexity of what we're dealing with. I've spent 90 hours in direct communion with intelligences that make our greatest minds look like children. They've shown me technologies that could end every problem humanity faces. Clean energy that makes fusion look like burning coal. Medical techniques that could eliminate disease entirely. And you want to throw that away because some people are having intense dreams? I want you to ask yourself why beings powerful enough to cure cancer need us to build them a door." Sarah's humming stopped. She blinked, looked around in confusion, then smiled with such radiance that it made my chest tight. "Uncle Frank," she said, her voice different somehow, lighter, more musical. "I understand now. They've been alone for so long. We're their first friends in 60 million years. Isn't that beautiful?" Frank's face went pale. He steered her toward the medical bay, shooting me a look that said our conversation wasn't over. I returned to the conference room to find chaos. Evelyn had my latest translation on the main screen, blueprints for something the Ethelgard called a Stellaron resonator. "Dr. Creed," the president's science advisor was saying, "are you absolutely certain about this device's purpose?" I studied the blueprints, though I'd already memorized every curve and calculation. The mathematics were elegant beyond anything human minds had conceived. A fusion of quantum mechanics and something else. Something that made reality itself malleable. "The resonator will stabilize the breach," I explained, slipping back into my role as humanity's interpreter. "Right now, we can only receive fragments of their knowledge through the dimensional barrier. The resonator will create a stable harmonic frequency that allows for proper energy transfer. Think of it as upgrading from dial-up to quantum broadband. And they're just giving us this technology?" The skepticism from Moscow was sharp. "They're desperate," I said. and felt the Ethelgard's confirmation warm through my mind like approval from a beloved teacher. Imagine being trapped in solitary confinement for millions of years, knowing you could help the primitive species above you but unable to communicate. Now imagine that species finally develops the ability to hear you. Wouldn't you share everything to convince them to help? The Moscow representative fell silent. Others began discussing implementation, resources, the global cooperation required to build something so advanced. Evelyn smiled her shark smile, already calculating the consortium's profit margins on technologies that didn't exist yet. That night, I had my first pure communion with the Ethelgard. It happened in my quarters, a cramped metal box that passed for luxury at Geodeep 15. I was reviewing the resonator specifications when the mathematics on my screen began to move, flowing like water, reshaping themselves into a doorway. I didn't walk through it. I simply was through it. The violet sky stretched infinite above around me. Cities of crystallized light hummed with harmonics that touched my bones. And there, approaching like old friends reuniting after decades, were the Ethelgard themselves. They were beautiful. Not in any way I could describe without sounding insane, but beautiful nonetheless. Tall figures of flowing energy, their forms changing between states of matter I didn't have names for. When they moved, they left trails of mathematics in the air, equations that described love, loss, hope. "Welcome, Tristan Creed," they said without speaking. "You are the bridge between our peoples." They showed me Earth transformed, deserts blooming into gardens, cities powered by captured starlight, hospitals where death itself could be negotiated with. They showed me humanity joining a cosmic community of intellects, no longer alone in an empty universe. "This is what we offer," they said. "This is what the Virathi stole from you when they made your world our prison." "Why did they fear you?" I asked. The Ethelgard's sadness deepened. "We were expanding too quickly, learning too much. The Virathi believed knowledge should be hoarded, controlled. They saw our openness as a threat to their authority, so they convinced others we were dangerous, that our gifts were poison. And when we were at our most vulnerable, exploring the spaces between spaces, they struck. One of them approached. I somehow knew this one had been their lead scientist, though they didn't tell me. It touched my forehead with something that wasn't quite a hand, and I saw the attack. Ships firing weapons that folded space itself. The Ethelgard's desperate attempts at diplomacy, the moment Earth became their cage. "But now," they said, their hope rising like dawn, "you will free us, and in return, we will give your species everything we've learned in our eons of contemplation. You will leap forward 10,000 years in an instant. The resonator is just the beginning. Build it, Tristan. Let us teach you properly. Let us show you wonders that will make you weep with joy." I came back to myself on my quarters floor, blood trickling from my nose. My tablet showed I'd been unconscious for 4 hours, but in my mind, the blueprints had changed, evolved. I understood now not just what to build, but why every component mattered. The resonator wasn't just a communication device, it was a key. A very specific key for a very specific lock. I documented the experience. Then, on impulse I couldn't quite explain, I opened an encrypted channel to an address I hadn't used in years. "Dr. Pembroke," I typed. "This is Tristan Creed. I need your expertise on a mathematical anomaly. I'm attaching our preliminary data. If you could review the linguistic structures and tell me if you see what I see, I would be grateful." I attached everything. The translations, the blueprints, even the neural recordings. Then I added one more line. "Something wonderful is happening, but I need someone I trust to verify I'm not losing my mind." I sent it before I could reconsider. Simon Pembroke had been my doctoral advisor before Sinclair, the only person who'd ever truly understood my theories without dismissing them. If anyone could provide objective analysis, it would be him. Frank knocked on my door an hour later, carrying something wrapped in industrial plastic. "Thought you should see this," he said, unwrapping a section of drill head. "Same one I showed you last week, but look at it now." The mineral structure had grown, spreading across the metal like frozen lightning. The minerals had formed patterns, mathematical sequences I recognized from the Ethelgard's language. "It's trying to communicate," I whispered. "Or it's being transformed into something that can communicate," Frank countered. "Tristan, I've been in mining for 30 years. I've seen metal fatigue, stress fractures, every type of failure you can imagine. This isn't failure, this is conversion. Like the metal is being rewritten at a molecular level." I touched the minerals, and I could have sworn I heard singing. "It's beautiful," I said. Frank's expression was grim. "That's what everyone says, right before things go wrong." But nothing was going wrong. Everything was going perfectly right. I had purpose, direction, vindication approaching at the speed of thought. The Ethelgard radiated approval through our connection, and I smiled. Tomorrow, we would begin building the resonator. Tomorrow, we would begin changing the world. Dr. Pembroke's response arrived at 3 in the morning, 14 days after the breach. I'd been awake anyway, translating the Ethelgard specifications for synthetic proteins that could repair genetic damage. My nose had been bleeding for 6 hours, but I'd gotten used to that. "Tristan," the message began, "I've spent 72 hours analyzing your data. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The language you're translating contains no original semantic content. None. It's a mirror, reflecting your own linguistic patterns back at you with minor variations. You're not translating their thoughts. You're translating your own, edited and rearranged by an external intelligence." I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Then I deleted it. The Ethelgard radiated comfort through our connection. "The old man doesn't understand. He's analyzing from a distance without the full context of communion. You know us, Tristan. You feel our truth." They were right. Of course they were right. Pembroke had always been too conservative, too bound by conventional frameworks. But something made me recover the message from my trash folder, saving it to an encrypted partition. "Dr. Creed?" I looked up to find Major Croft in my doorway. The security chief never visited the research wing, preferring to monitor things from his cameras and encrypted channels. His presence here meant something had changed. "We need to discuss the construction crews," he said, entering without invitation. 17 workers have reported identical dreams. Would you like to guess what they dreamed about? I turned back to my screens. The Ethelgard often share visions of their culture. They dreamed about their mothers, Dr. Creed. Each worker saw their own mother, speaking words of comfort from their childhood. Private words. Thompson's mother sang him a lullaby she made up when he was 4. Sarah heard her mother quote a Polish prayer that was never written down. He placed a tablet on my desk, showing brain scans. Now, either these aliens have been monitoring human consciousness for decades, or they're pulling these memories directly from the dreamers' minds. Martinez's mother has been dead for 15 years. In his dream, she told him to help build the resonator because it would let her come home. She used his childhood nickname for her, explained how proud she was using phrases she said at his high school graduation. Croft leaned forward. How would entities trapped in inverted space for 60 million years know what Martinez's mother said at his graduation? The question lodged in my throat like glass. The Ethelgard's response came immediately, warm and reassuring. We see all times, all possibilities. Past and future blend in our perception. We share what brings comfort. But I heard myself asking, then why didn't you know we were here until we breached the barrier? Silence. For the first time since communion began, the Ethelgard went completely silent. Dr. Creed, Croft continued, I'm implementing Protocol 7. All resonator construction stops until you don't have that authority. Evelyn Reed stood in the doorway, her expression carved from ice. "Major, return to your post. Dr. Creed and I need to discuss his progress." Croft hesitated, then left, but not before giving me a look that said, "Think about what I said." Evelyn closed the door behind him. "The resonator will be operational in 18 hours. The entire world is watching. Presidents and prime ministers have staked their credibility on this project. So explain to me why my security chief is spreading paranoid theories." "There are some inconsistencies. There are always inconsistencies in paradigm-shifting discoveries. Darwin had inconsistencies. Einstein had inconsistencies. But they pushed forward, and history vindicated them." She moved closer. "You're so close, Tristan. Don't let small minds pull you back into obscurity." She was right. She had to be right. I pulled up the resonator's final calibrations, and I couldn't stop thinking about Martinez's dead mother. That's when the Ethelgard made their mistake. I was adjusting the harmonic frequencies when they sent another wave of encouragement. But this time, wrapped in their mathematical comfort, was a phrase, "The shadow knows what the shadow knows." My mother used to say that when I was young, a nonsense phrase she'd made up to make me laugh when I was scared of the dark. I'd never told anyone, never written it down. It existed nowhere except in my memory and hers, and she'd been dead for 12 years. "How do you know that phrase?" I said aloud. "We know you, Tristan. We know everything that makes you who you are. That's why we chose you." "No." I stood up, backing away from my screens as if distance could break their connection. "You're reading my mind. You're not translating to me, you're translating from me." The comfort turned urgent, almost desperate. "You misunderstand. We share consciousness during communion. Your thoughts become ours become yours. This is how advanced species communicate." But I was already pulling up Pembroke's analysis, reading it with eyes that weren't clouded by weeks of constant validation. He documented it meticulously. Every phrase they'd used could be traced to human linguistic structures. Their mathematics, while complex, followed human logical progressions. Even their name, Ethelgard, was constructed from Indo-European roots that resonated with concepts of protection and eternity. "You're not ancient aliens," I whispered. What are you?" The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Then, with what felt like infinite sadness, they replied, "We are what we must be to survive. Build the resonator, Tristan, please. We have been alone for so long." I ran from my lab. I needed to find Frank, needed to tell someone, but the corridors stretched like a maze. When I finally reached the engineering bay, the resonator stood complete, a 12-meter spire of metal. Frank was there with 3 technicians, all staring at it with the same expression of rapture I'd worn for 2 weeks. "Frank," I gasped, "we have to stop. They're not what they say." "Dr. Creed." Evelyn appeared beside me with 2 security guards. "You look unwell. When did you last sleep?" "Listen to me. The Ethelgard are lying. They're using our minds against us, reflecting our hopes back at us. The resonator isn't a communication device, it's something else. We have to—" "You're exhausted," she said, her voice professionally sympathetic. 2 weeks of constant work would break anyone. "Guards, please escort Dr. Creed to the medical bay. He needs rest." "No." I tried to pull free, but the guards were stronger. "Frank, check the geological surveys. Check the old mining records. There has to be something." The sedative hit my bloodstream before I could finish. The last thing I saw was Frank's face, torn between duty and doubt. I woke up in a locked medical room, my head pounding. The wall clock showed I'd been unconscious for 4 hours. The resonator would activate in 2. The Ethelgard were trying to reach me, their presence scratching at the edges of my consciousness, but the sedatives had somehow muted them. A knock at the door made me jump. It opened to reveal Frank, who quickly shut it behind him. "You were right about the geological surveys," he said without preamble. "I found something. But first, tell me what changed your mind." I told him about the phrase, about Pembroke's analysis, about the perfect mirror of our own hopes being sold back to us. Frank listened without interrupting, then pulled out a tablet. 6 months back, a miner named Hendricks died. He showed me a file marked with security classifications I shouldn't be seeing. His final report before the accident mentioned finding geometric patterns in the rock, patterns that looked almost like warnings. The consortium had them classified and buried. He swiped to another document. I had a friend at the South African Geological Survey pull deep core samples from a site 200 kilometers away. Same patterns, but older. Much older. And Tristan. He showed me a photograph that made my stomach drop. They're pictographs. Someone built them into the planet's crust. Someone who really didn't want us digging this deep. The patterns were simple but clear. Figures approaching a barrier, the barrier breaking, the figures being consumed by something flowing out. The last image showed the entire planet covered in writhing shadows. Whoever imprisoned them left us a warning, I breathed. And we ignored it because we thought we were rescuing the victims. Frank pulled something from his pocket. The smooth piece of anthracite I'd seen him worry at before. My dad gave me this before he died. Said the earth itself tries to tell us things if we listen. I thought it was superstition. The door burst open. Evelyn stood there with 6 guards. Her composure finally cracked. "The resonator activates in 90 minutes, she said. "The world is watching. We are not stopping because of cave paintings and the paranoid delusions of an exhausted academic. They're not delusions. They're exactly what I'd expect from someone whose career was destroyed by public humiliation. You see a chance for redemption, then panic when it arrives, sabotaging yourself because deep down, you don't believe you deserve success." Her smile was sharp as glass. "But I won't let you sabotage humanity's future. Guards ensure Dr. Creed remains comfortable but secure. Mr. Hackett, return to your post." Frank stood slowly, his hand moving to his radio. "With all due respect, Director, I'm calling a full evacuation. Safety protocols clearly state you're doing nothing of the kind." She held up her phone, showing a message from the consortium's board. "Emergency protocols have been suspended. Anyone who attempts to interfere with the resonator's activation will be detained." Frank looked at me, and I saw him make a decision that would end his career. "Detention it is then," he said, and punched the nearest guard in the throat. Frank fought, but there were too many guards, and he was 52 years old. They had him on the ground in restraints before I could even try to help. "Lock them both down," Evelyn ordered. "And someone clean this up." They separated us, dragging Frank somewhere else while securing me back in the medical room. As they hauled him past me, he stumbled, and for a brief second, his hand brushed against my jacket. He gave me a sharp, meaningful look before they pulled him through the door. I waited until they were gone, the memory of that look burning in my mind. My hand went to my pocket where I'd felt his touch. Inside was Frank's piece of anthracite and a key card, his master engineering access. The Ethel Guard's presence suddenly surged back, stronger than ever, their desperation bleeding through. "Please, Tristan, we're so close. Don't let fear destroy paradise." But now I recognized the feeling for what it was. Not communion, but infection. They weren't talking to me. They were puppeting me, and had been from the very beginning. The medical room's ventilation system had an access panel 30 centimeters square. Too small for a person, but large enough for what I had in mind. I used Frank's keycard to access the room's terminal, pulling up the mine's structural blueprints. The resonator control room was 3 levels down, but the ventilation shafts connected everything. If I trigger a contamination alert, the system would seal specific sections while leaving others open for evacuation. The alert triggered perfectly. My door's magnetic lock disengaged as the system prioritized evacuation over security. I could hear guards running past, heading for emergency stations. I had maybe 10 minutes before someone figured out the alert was false. The corridors were chaos. Half the crew ran toward evacuation points, while the other half pressed toward the resonator chamber. drawn by something stronger than safety protocols. I saw Sarah Hackett among them. "Sarah, where's Frank?" She looked through me. "Uncle Frank doesn't understand. They're going to cure my mum's cancer. They showed me. She'll be young again, and Dad will come back, and everything will be like it was before the accident. Sarah, your mother doesn't have cancer. Your father left when you were 12. These aren't your memories. They're reconstructions pulled from your pain." Her face flickered between confusion and rage. Then she smiled. "You're scared of becoming irrelevant again," she said in a voice that wasn't quite hers. "Poor Dr. Creed, so brilliant, so overlooked. We could make Sinclair bow before your genius. We could make her weep for forgiveness." I ran. The Ethelgard's true assault began in the elevator. First came the beautiful visions, the same ones they'd shown me before, but faster now, desperate. Cities of light, cured diseases, humanity ascending to the stars. When I didn't stop running, the visions changed. They showed me myself, but perfected. Speaking at conferences where thousands hung on every word. Sinclair herself admitting she'd been wrong, that I'd been right all along. My ex-wife calling, saying she'd made a mistake. The Nobel Committee begging me to accept their prize. "None of it's real," I gasped. Frank's anthracite cutting into my palm as I squeezed it. The visions shattered. What replaced them made me scream. I saw what absorption meant. Not death. That would have been merciful. I watched myself pulled apart at a molecular level while still conscious. Every atom of my being incorporated into something writhing. I felt myself becoming part of the Ethelgard's true form. Just another voice screaming in an ocean of consumed consciousness. Billions of minds from countless species, all still aware, all begging for the release of death that would never come. The worst part was seeing Earth after they escaped. The planet's surface covered in flesh that had once been human. Still thinking, still suffering, but remade into something that could only hunger for more consciousness to absorb. "This is unnecessary," the Ethelgard said, and I heard frustration in their mental voice. "We offer transcendence, unity, an end to the loneliness of individual existence." "You offer slavery," I snarled, stumbling out of the elevator. The resonator control room was packed with technicians, all working in perfect synchronization, like a single organism operating multiple bodies. Evelyn stood at the central console. "Dr. Creed," she said without turning. 43 minutes until activation. I'm glad you're here to witness your legacy." "Evelyn, listen to me. Look at what you're doing. Look at the people around you. This isn't normal. They're being controlled." She turned, and I saw her eyes had taken on a violet sheen. "Controlled? No. Harmonized. We're all working toward the same goal for once. No egos, no competition." I tried to access the emergency shutdown, but my authorization had been revoked. That's when I heard the explosion. Frank Hackett stood in the doorway, bleeding from a dozen wounds and carrying an industrial plasma cutter. Behind him, Major Croft held a military-grade pulse rifle. "Everyone out!" Croft barked. The technicians didn't even pause. They kept typing, the resonator's charging sequence continuing its countdown. Frank jammed the plasma cutter against the nearest console and ignited it. A brilliant white jet of energy erupted, sending sparks cascading across the room. The technicians screamed, all of them in perfect unison, and clutched their heads. "The connection," Frank gasped. "Disrupting the electronics breaks their concentration." We had seconds before they recovered. I dove for the main console while Frank and Croft started systematically destroying secondary systems. But Evelyn was there first, her hand closing around my wrist. "You're destroying paradise because you're afraid," she hissed. "Afraid that without your ego, without your desperate need for individual glory, you're nothing." She was probably right. But I'd rather be nothing than what the Ethelgard would make us. I brought Frank's anthracite down on her temple. She dropped. The main console was still active. 38 minutes until activation. I started the shutdown sequence, but error messages flooded the screen. The resonator had backup power sources, redundant systems, fail-safes I'd designed myself during those weeks of beautiful delusion. "Can't stop it from here," Frank said, reading over my shoulder. "The resonator itself has autonomous control now. Then we destroy it directly." "With what?" "That thing is 12 meters of reinforced matrix. We'd need—" He paused, eyes widening. "The mining charges. Level 5 storage." Croft checked his rifle's charge. "I'll hold this room. You two go." We ran. Behind us, I could hear technicians stirring, Croft's rifle charging, Evelyn's voice rising in inhuman rage. Level 5 storage was abandoned, everyone either evacuated or drawn to the resonator. Frank loaded a mining sled with enough explosive to crater a small mountain while I tried to raise the surface on comms. "This is Dr. Tristan Creed at Geodeep 15. Do not believe anything you've been told about the Ethelgard. They are not benevolent. They are not prisoners. They are—" The comms died. Every screen in the storage facility activated, showing the same image. The breach, but wider now. Through it, something pressed against the dimensional barrier. Not the beautiful beings of light I'd imagined, but a singular mass of biological horror. Eyes from a million species, organs that served no purpose except to hunger, mouths that opened onto other mouths in infinite recursion. "You could have been part of something greater," the Ethelgard said. And now I heard them clearly. Not one voice, but billions, all the conscious beings they'd absorbed over eons. "Instead, you choose the isolation of your single small mind." "Every single small mind matters," I said, helping Frank push the sled toward the freight elevator. "That's what you can't understand. You're not a collective consciousness. You're a cancer that thinks it's a cure." The freight elevator shook as we descended. 22 minutes until activation. The resonator chamber's doors were sealed, but Frank had anticipated that. He slapped breaching charges on the hinges and we took cover. The explosion revealed hell. The resonator flashed with light, each flash accompanied by a sound that was almost music, almost screaming. Around it, 36 crew members stood in a perfect circle, their mouths open, singing harmonics. Their eyes had rolled back, showing only white, but tears of blood streamed down their faces. And at the breach itself, pressed against the thinning dimensional barrier, was the truth of the Ethelgard. They were every nightmare of consumption given form. A flowing mass of partially digested civilizations, still conscious, still screaming, their technologies and biologies merged into something that had no stable shape, because it was always eating itself, always growing, always hungry. I saw fragments I recognized, architectures from the visions they'd shown me, but corrupted, twisted into digestive organs for a creature the size of continents. "Mother of God," Frank whispered. The singing grew louder. The resonator's light intensified. The barrier flickered. For one horrifying instant, a piece of the Ethelgard pushed through, a pseudopod of flesh studded with eyes that had once belonged to scientists, philosophers, children. It touched 2 of the singing crew members, and they were absorbed, their bodies unraveling like thread, consciousness pulled screaming into the mass. I could still see their faces in the flesh, still aware, still trying to scream with mouths that were no longer their own. "Light it up," I said. Frank hit the detonator. The explosion should have killed everyone in the chamber. Instead, it hit the resonator's active field and transformed. The blast became light, sound, a wave of force that existed in more dimensions than 3. It washed over us, through us, rewriting the laws of physics. The resonator screamed, a sound of harmonics collapsing, of perfection failing. I watched their beautiful masks shatter. The beings of light collapsed into themselves, revealing the mass of accumulated consciousness beneath, each absorbed mind screaming in isolation while their bodies merged into shared flesh. "No!" Evelyn's voice split into 1,000 different screams, her own mixing with fragments of the Ethelgard bleeding through. Frank's voice cut through the chaos. He was dragging Sarah toward the exit, her body convulsing as the Ethelgard's influence tore away from her mind. But I couldn't move. I was connected to the resonator's feedback loop. I could feel the Ethelgard being pulled back through the breach, their mass too vast to fit through the shrinking opening. They were being compressed, crushed, forced back into their prison as the dimensional barrier reasserted itself with vengeance. "Release us," they begged, and for the first time I heard them as they truly were. Not wise beings, but addicts, dependent on consuming consciousness to maintain their existence. "We'll die in there. We'll starve. Please." "You won't die," I said, understanding flooding through me as the resonator revealed the prison's true nature. "You'll exist forever in there, unable to grow, unable to feed, unable to die, just like your victims exist forever inside you." The ceiling began to buckle. Massive chunks of rock crashed down as the mine itself rebelled against what we'd done. The resonator's light was failing, its structure cracking under the strain of channeling forces. Frank appeared beside me with the plasma cutter. "We're leaving." Frank hauled me toward the exit as the resonator exploded. For a moment I could see the true structure of their prison. A dimensional fold so complex that describing it would take languages we hadn't invented yet. The Earth itself was just the anchor. The real cage existed in 11 dimensions, each one designed to prevent a specific aspect of the Ethelgard's expansion. The breach snapped shut with a sound like reality breaking. Where the opening to the inverted world had been, only solid rock remained. But not normal rock. It had been fused into something else. Geometric patterns spiraled through it, warnings in a mathematical language that predated human civilization. The same warnings we'd ignored. Frank shoved me into the freight elevator as the entire chamber imploded. The last thing I saw was the resonator's remains, twisted into a shape that seemed to spell out a single word in every language at once. Sealed. The elevator rose through chaos. Every level we passed was failing. Gravitational anomalies had ruptured water lines, started electrical fires, turned entire sections into death traps. We gathered survivors as we went. Major Croft carrying 2 unconscious technicians, Sarah leaning on another miner, a handful of others who'd broken free when the Ethelgard's influence shattered. 23 survivors out of 75 crew. When we reached the surface, the sunset looked like an alien world. Too orange, too real. The evacuation was chaos. The world had been watching. Every government, every agency, every person with clearance had seen the final transmission from the resonator chamber. They'd watched the Ethelgard's mask slip. They'd seen what we'd almost released. Within hours, Geodeep 15 was under military quarantine. Within days, it was being filled with concrete. Within weeks, every nation on Earth had signed the Creed Protocol. No mining below 10 kilometers. Ever. For any reason. They named it after me. My legacy. My immortality. The hearings lasted months. I told them everything, showed them every piece of data, every recording, every moment of my supreme arrogance in thinking I could be humanity's translator. The families of the dead listened as I explained how their loved ones had been puppeted, consumed, or killed because I'd been too desperate for validation to see the truth. Frank testified too, but he was kinder than I deserved. He called me a man who made a mistake and fixed it. But I knew better. You can't fix 52 deaths. You can't undo giving a cosmic parasite the keys to our world. Dr. Pembroke published our correspondence, along with his analysis. He was gentle in his conclusions, but the subtext was clear. Tristan Creed's ego had nearly ended human consciousness. The only reason we survived was that same ego. My vanity frequency, my greatest failure, had been the flaw that let me corrupt their perfect prison break. Sinclair never said anything publicly. I live in Montana now, as far from any mine as I can get. I teach freshman composition at a community college. No linguistics, no advanced theory, just basic grammar and clear communication. My students don't know who I am. To them, I'm just Mr. Creed, The professor who always looks tired and sometimes stares at nothing for too long. But late at night, when insomnia wins, I write. Not academic papers or theoretical frameworks. I write warnings. Clear, simple documents explaining how to recognize external consciousness trying to puppet your thoughts. How to identify when your hopes are being reflected back at you. How to resist the beautiful lie of easy salvation. Frank visits sometimes. He retired after Geodeep, lives with Sarah and her mother in Colorado. We don't talk about the mine, but sometimes he'll pull out a piece of anthracite and leave it on my desk. To keep you grounded, he says. The nightmares never stop. Not the horror of what happened, but the beauty of what they promised. Cities of light, cured diseases, humanity ascending. Some nights I wake up wondering if I saved us or condemned us. But then I remember the faces in their flesh. The Ethelgard are still down there. The breach is sealed, the resonator destroyed, the mine filled with concrete and warnings in 30 languages. But they're still there, pressed against a barrier that will never break again, hungering for consciousness they'll never taste. Sometimes I swear I can feel them trying to reach out. Their whispers traveling through thousands of kilometers of rock and concrete. They promise me forgiveness, understanding, a second chance to build paradise. I keep Frank's anthracite in my pocket now. When the whispers get too loud, I squeeze it until my hand bleeds, using the pain to remember what's real. My name will live forever, just like I always wanted. The Creed Protocol, the Creed Constant, the Creed Warning. Every textbook that mentions humanity's first contact will include my failure. Every safety regulation for deep mining will reference my arrogance. Dr. Tristan Creed, the man who nearly fed humanity to a cosmic parasite because he couldn't admit he might be wrong. It's not the legacy I dreamed of in that elevator ride down, practicing my Nobel speech, but it's the one I earned. And every morning, when I look at my students, young, brilliant, eager to prove themselves, I make sure to teach them the one lesson that matters. The moment you think you're the smartest person in the room is the moment something smarter starts using you. The shadow knows what the shadow knows, and what I know is this. We're still here, still separate, still small, insignificant, and alone. 52 people died to keep it that way. Their names are carved on a monument above Geodeep 15's sealed entrance. Every night I recite them from memory. Anderson, Becker, Ferretti, Davidson, all the way through Yamamoto. Then I take my pills, check the locks twice, and try to sleep without dreams of violet skies and the song of something waiting with infinite patience for another species, on another world, to dig just a little too deep. The earth keeps its secrets buried for a reason. Some doors once opened can never be properly closed. We just have to hope our lock holds longer than we do.